Hello, my name is Newman, and I serve as president of the Caribbean Graduate School of Theology in Kingston, Jamaica. I also have the privilege of being a member of the Infinite networking team, and I'm very happy that the team is there attending the annual conference of the American Society of Missiologists in Minneapolis. I wish I could be with you, but I'm here in Kingston and have to share via this link. I wish to make a very small contribution to the discussion, and the contribution is from the perspective of the Caribbean, and my topic is Contextualizing Christianity in the Caribbean, the story of the Power of Faith ministries in Jamaica. And in my abstract, I assert that Christianity in the Caribbean has been transformed over the last 2 centuries from the religion of the master class to the religion of the underclasses. And in this journey, new forms of Christianity have emerged, which go beyond classical notions of contextualization to the creation of new forms of Christian expression. In the case of Jamaica, some of these new forms of Christianity challenge new thinking, which proposes a contested view of a secular state for the Jamaican society. In this presentation, I will examine the case of an independent Jamaican Pentecostal church, the Power of Faith ministries, as an expression of Jamaican Pentecostalism that enables transformation of Christianity into a religion of the people. It would also seek to discern key missiological factors that have contributed to the growth of this religious movement into becoming the largest Christian congregation in the Caribbean. But here's my outline. This is what I hope to share with you briefly. First, I wish to look at the Caribbean in context. What is the Caribbean? What are we about? Secondly, I'd like to look at Christianity in the Caribbean briefly. And then thirdly, we want to look at some challenges facing Caribbean Christianity. And then we will look at this issue of contextualization, contextualizing Caribbean Christianity. And then we will examine the case of the Power of Faith ministries and try to draw out some missiological significance and then some words of conclusion. Well, visitors to the Caribbean are often amazed at the extraordinary diversity, beauty, and complexity of this distinctive linguistic and cultural subregion of the Americas. Indeed, the Caribbean is a very beautiful place with some unique geographical features. There are, in fact, 5 linguistic cultural zones that comprise the Caribbean. There is a Spanish Caribbean that includes the countries of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. We even include Costa Rica, at least some sections of Costa Rica, Colombia, Panama, Dominican Republic, and so on. There is a sort of a Spanish Caribbean as part of the ancient Mesoamerican peninsula. Then there is a Francophone Caribbean. Countries of Haiti and Guadeloupe and Martinique and French Guiana comprise the Francophone Caribbean. Of course, we have the Anglophone Caribbean, countries of Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and so on, part of the English-speaking Caribbean community. There is a Dutch Caribbean. The ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao are part of the Netherlands Antilles, and then there's Suriname. And there is a Danish Caribbean, St. Croix, and others. So we have these 5 linguistic cultural zones that comprise Caribbean. Comparatively, Caribbean demographics are quite small. We have a combined population of just over 30 million, scattered across over 30 small developing states in the middle of the Atlantic, encircled by the Caribbean Sea. And over the last 5 centuries, this distinctive sub-region of the Americas has blended Europe and Africa and Asia and the Middle East into a potpourri of Creole cultures in the process of creating a new Atlantic world. The environment of the Caribbean is very lush and tropical, and indeed it makes the Caribbean a very exotic place. However, beneath its exotic appeal lie some fundamental challenges, which a Caribbean leader once described as a bit of a struggle in the periphery, or like going up and down escalator. So what about Christian presence in the Caribbean? What do we have? But since the early 16th century, waves of European missionaries representing Catholic and Protestant Christianity have made their mark across the region. Christianity is the dominant religion of the region, 59% of which is Catholic, 25% Protestant, 14% Afro-Caribbean, and 1% Hindu, and 1% Islam and Judaism. Christian churches exist in every Caribbean country. There is, on the Catholic side, annual Antilles Episcopal Conference, which provides an important trans-regional forum for Roman Catholic bishops and archbishops to guide the mission of the church in the region. The AEC has been quite strong in its advocacy of a preferential option for the poor and works diligently among the poor and marginalized, even while seeking to renew the spiritual life of parish missions. For the Evangelical Church, on the other hand, there's a strong regional organization, the Caribbean Evangelical Alliance, formerly the Evangelical Association of the Caribbean, whose declared vision is to work towards ensuring that every church is empowered to transform Caribbean society through biblical discipleship so that poverty is reduced, peace or wholeness is increased, and public justice is ensured, and national righteousness develops. So there's Christian presence in the Caribbean, and this has been the case over the last 4 decades. But today, Christianity in the Caribbean faces many challenges. Among them are these, and I've just decided to identify 4 critical challenges. First, there's a deepening social crisis. Manifestation of this crisis, they're seen in increasingly high levels of crime and violence, high levels of unemployment and underemployment, growing production and trafficking of illegal drugs and human trafficking. And according to UNAIDS, the Caribbean now has the reputation of being the 2nd largest area of the world for the spread of HIV/AIDS. There is a deepening social crisis occurring in the Caribbean. But secondly, there is the issue of poverty, which has been described as persistent poverty. Despite vigorous reduction strategies by state and para-state actors, poverty persists in much of the Caribbean. Although there is some improvement in living standards in several sections of the region, living conditions for many remain well below accepted poverty levels. But thirdly, there is the issue of people's participation. Over the last 40 years, most Caribbean states have achieved political independence from various European colonial masters. However, so far, the failures of post-independence politics to deliver much of the expected benefits of national sovereignty, self-government, and decolonization have impacted in politics and participation in their own society. So there is a sense in which the people are unhappy with their participation and levels of participation in their own forms of self-government. And fourthly, I argue that one of the challenges facing Caribbean Christianity is the decline of biblical and theological reflection. Is less evident. In fact, in many parts of the Caribbean, there's a waning confidence in the Christian gospel and very little attempt to address the issue of nationhood under God as a challenge for emerging nations. Well, this then brings us to the question of contextualizing Caribbean Christianity. There are several projects aimed at indigenizing and contextualizing Christianity in the Caribbean. Among them are the following. There's a major translation project of the Bible Society to produce vernacular texts of the Bible into what is called the heart language of the people. This, of course, initially ran into several areas of resistance, but I think acceptance levels are growing for this translation project. And it is a form of contextualizing Christianity in the vernacular of the people. But secondly, translations of hymns and liturgies into Caribbean cultural rhythms and forms, and the creation of new liturgical forms, including the Anglican Reggae Mass and Lester Lewis's Every Time I Read My Bible, I Get a Little Knowledge. These forms of contextualizing the gospel in the region are occurring, albeit slowly. And then thirdly, there's free and open discourse in Christianity as a religion of the poor and the dispossessed, and not a prerogative of the learned upper classes. Perhaps Bob Marley's anti-establishment protest song with Christian radical overtones, which was voted the song of the 20th century, expresses it best. Let's get together to fight this holy Armageddon. One love, one heart. And he ends, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel all right. So in the midst of this, these attempts, small and sparse, but nonetheless important attempts at contextualizing Christianity in the Caribbean, we come to the case of the power of faith ministry. This paper examines the story of the power of faith ministries as a case study of Jamaican Pentecostalism as a religion of the underclass, in which Christian forms and rites are appropriated and transformed into a religion that demonstrably enables the poor and semi-poor to overcome social disorder and generations of hopelessness. The rise and spread of Jamaican Pentecostalism from the late 19th century has opened possibilities for the working class beyond the primordial state. The story of the Power of Faith Ministries, or POFM, began as an independent church in Waterford, St. Catherine in Jamaica on the 23rd of April, 1983. The Power of Faith Ministries is now a transnational story, a story of indigenous mission and contextualization of Christianity in the Caribbean for global missions. Australian anthropologist Diane Austin Bruce refers to the inventiveness of early Jamaican Pentecostalism in her book, Jamaica Genesis, which she published in 1997. Delford Davis is the pastor and co-founder of the Power of Faith Ministries. He and his wife, Minister Petrova Davis, have witnessed the growth of their Pentecostal church throughout Jamaica and across the world. The Jamaican Power of Faith Ministries has spread beyond Jamaica with several branches in the United States, in Canada, and the United Kingdom. Congregations have been planted in Brooklyn and the Bronx in New York, in Hollywood in Florida, in Grove Road in Kennecott and Kingston, in Goshen in St. Elizabeth, in Western Jamaica, in Bogwalk in St. Catherine, and in London, UK, and Toronto, Canada. Well, let me share with you a little story. A story of a man called Winston. Winston was a construction worker. He works as an itinerant mason and goes wherever he finds work. He has a family, a wife, and 3 children, and they're home in the Sunshine City of Portmore, among over 200,000 residents in this bedroom community adjoining Jamaica's capital city, Kingston. On a very hot day, about 20 years ago, he was wandering through an open field on his way to look for work in order to support his family. And he came upon a religious meeting under a tent in the park and was drawn to the strong, charismatic preaching of a Jamaican evangelist holding forth under the little brown tent. And curious about what was happening, he waited out the event and went to see the preacher afterwards. The preacher in that tent is now the leader of the largest mega church in the Caribbean. He's referred to as the Bishop of Portmore. That preacher was Delford Davis. Davis was born in the community of Mavis Bank in the mountains of East Rural St. Andrew. He was a 3rd child in a family of 8. In the family in which he grew up, everyone was expected to work and make their contribution to the family's development. As a teenager, he found a job in downtown Kingston in the bustling center of Jamaica's capital merchandising district, which was largely run by Middle Easterners and East and South Asians at the time. As a youngster, he took pride in his motorcycle, a Big Head 50 Honda. And it's just an example of how he takes pride in things that are very important to him. Davis prefers to tell a story of how he was called and commissioned to preach the gospel. And based on a reading of Matthew 9, he felt that people were like, quote, sheep without shepherd, and that there was an urgent need to preach the gospel everywhere so that people would come to know God. So in 1977, he was ordained as a minister of religion, and in 1978, he married Petrova Hitchman, his wife of so many years. The union produced 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and he traveled widely as a young evangelist and preached all over the island. In 1980, he, like so many Jamaicans at the time, migrated to the USA and lived in New York until 1983, 3 years later, when he felt the strong urge to return to Jamaica to engage in Christian ministry. And in 1996, he was ordained as a bishop. Well, Winston began to attend a preacher's little church, and one Sunday the preacher pointed at him and said, "Sir, young man, would you come forward to the altar?" He wasn't sure to whom the order was directed. Nevertheless, he went forward, and what he heard surprised him. The preacher said, "I saw you as a Philip," a reference to the New Testament apostle who became the gatekeeper to Jesus, as recorded in John 12:20-36. Winston took this as a matter of spiritual discernment, and later he became a deacon in the church. As deacon, his role was to help develop the vocational training programs of the church, to make the unemployed marketable through skills training that included indoor and outdoor painting, interior decorating, draper making, baking, hairdressing, and other in-demand labor market skills. He helped develop a partnership between this church-based skills training program and the national training agency, HEART. They were providing skill training for many young people in the local community. As Winston saw it, it was Davis's dream to cater to the whole person. The church's mission, he believed, included compassionate care for the whole people. And Davis, through his church, established a bakery to provide bread for the poor, and a restaurant called an Oasis as an income generation project to support its food chain development. He established a health clinic to provide primary health care for the poor, in which for a small fee, health checks were provided and basic health services were offered. He later established a pharmacy with a licensed pharmacist to make healthcare remedies more readily accessible to the poor. And as the church grew and the needs of the members multiplied, Davis put in place a food and clothing distribution center to provide cheap and sometimes recycled clothing for the poor. The social interventions and entrepreneurial activities of the church offered members of the church and the local community not only opportunities to find employment, but also fellowship and spiritual nurture and growth and development. Davis's favorite text, from which he preached many, many times, is this, quote, "The people that know their God shall be strong and do exploits." Daniel 11, verse 32b. Well, Davis, as the church grew, became a man of the media. He has invested in a state-of-the-art media studio that records every service and transmits to other congregations locally in Jamaica and overseas. He owns his own cable channel and is daily on radio and television. His media center has become a training ground for young people in a variety of media-related skills, such as sound engineers, cameramen, technicians, etc. Winston became a cameraman in this setting and learned an important technical skill. In 2013, Jamaican journalist Nadine Wilson visited the Power of Faith Ministries and described what she saw and thought of the church's ministry in Portmore, St. Catherine. This is what she says, and I quote, "Some might consider the surround sound system, the huge flat screen televisions jutting from the roof, the glitzy ceiling, the industrial-looking air-conditioned units, the padded pews, and even chandeliers hanging above the pulpit a bit extravagant. But these seem to be of little concern to the worshippers, who, during our recent visit, appeared more taken with the quality of the ministry. This intense spiritual relationship between the members of the church and the Creator has been fostered through regular fasting sessions and prayer meetings at the worship center." And then she concludes, "Apart from the spiritual upliftment of its members, however, the church has focused its efforts on injecting the municipality with a raft of social programs aimed at easing the burdens of those most in need." Well, the Power of Faith Ministries grew, and today it is the largest congregation in the Caribbean. And Davis's exploits soon came to national attention. In 2005, he took the very bold step in calling on the nation of Jamaica to a Heal the Family, Heal the Nation convention at the national arena. The event has now been drafted onto a national calendar of events and is recognized for its significance in helping to inspire hope in the nation. At the beginning of each year, national leaders are among those who join the church family in a day of prayer and fasting during their convention. The Vice-Regal Governor General of Jamaica, Sir Patrick Allen, commended Davis publicly, saying, "You demonstrate the importance of the role of the church in nation building, helping to foster strong families and socially functional communities. Former mayor of Portmore, the late George Lee, said that Davis's church has, quote, without a doubt, been one of the gems of the Sunshine City. But perhaps the pinnacle of national recognition in Jamaica was the selection of Davis to be the Christian leader to address the nation at the 34th Annual National Leadership Prayer Breakfast held in Kingston, the nation's capital, in January 2014. Here he addressed over 500 leaders of state, church, and civic life, and his address was transmitted live by all media houses and reported on in the press. At the conclusion of his well-received and challenging address, Davis dramatically called the two protagonists, political leaders in Jamaica, to the platform. He held their hands and publicly prayed for unity among them. This act, in the context of bitter and fractious Machiavellian politics, which has often been destructive to the Jamaican society, was a potent symbol of the unity that the nation longs for. And there you may see images of Davis in the center, the leader of the opposition on the left, and the Prime Minister, Portia Miller, on the right. And in one of the images to the right, you see His Excellency the Governor General giving a warm hug to Bishop Delford Davis. Just to mention, before we conclude, that Davis, even though he runs an independent Pentecostal church, he's a man with strong ecumenical relationships. Although the co-founder and leader of the Independent Pentecostal Church, Davis does enjoy good and strong ecumenical relationships with other church leaders in Jamaica and beyond. He has served as president of the Jamaica Association of Full Gospel Churches, a member of the executive of the Portmore Ministers Fraternal, and a member of the National Religious Broadcasting Commission. He's currently chairman of the Power of Faith Ministries Basic School Board and School Board Chaplain. He's a marriage officer, a justice of the peace, and a member of the Lay Magistrates Association of Jamaica. He has a strong preaching ministry. He has been described as an evangelist at heart, and central to his ministry is a strong textual preaching. Matthew 9 and Daniel 11 are key texts that he uses very often. Well, like Winston, who was one of his early deacons, people tend to gravitate to wherever they find strong, charismatic biblical preaching. As the Power of Faith ministries grew from the little tent to what was popularly called the Board Church, a wooden building in Waterford, so too did evangelistic efforts of Davis. His now 8,000-seater church lies in the flight path of planes landing at the International Airport in Kingston. And at one time, emblazoned on the roof of his sprawling church, in large visible letters, were the words, "Prepare to meet thy God." So the question is, what's the missiological significance? I have looked briefly, sketched a bit of the ministry and the background of the Power of Faith Ministries and its senior pastor, Delford Davis. Is there any missiological significance in the model of the Power of Faith Ministries as a case study of contextualization of Christianity in the Caribbean context? Let me suggest a few. First, effective church planting and church growth emerges from a deeply embedded prayer movement. Just like the beginnings of the Power of Faith Ministries in a little brown tent, just like the river, as Sam Cooke says in his famous song, has been rolling ever since. Prayer movements bind people together, and they drive a passionate sense of mission. Secondly, effective church planting and church growth occur when there is a strong emphasis on biblical preaching, development of a witnessing and evangelistic ministry, and practicing mission and outreach as holistic mission. Delford Davis is an evangelist at heart. Thirdly, effective church planting and church growth require bold entrepreneurial leadership with an air of flexibility and innovation. Davis's exploits as a social entrepreneur have earned him a large following because people believe that he's a leader who cares. He built shops and rented to members of the congregation. In this way, he is responding to the socioeconomic needs of the working class poor, as well as catering to their spiritual welfare. The success of his ministry underscores the power and impact of holistic mission. Fourthly, effective church planting and church growth are stimulated by a strong focus on ministry to children and families. For the past few years, the Power of Faith Ministries has hosted an annual gathering of all churches and their congregations in the municipality of Portmore for an Easter ecumenical event. I attended the Encounter 2014 event, and I was impressed by the attention and the space provided for children, including a separate building dedicated to a children's church. In addition to a dance group and the mass choirs and the melodies of praise, these have enlivened the worship experience at Power of Faith Ministries. But fifthly, effective church planting and church growth must include investments in technology and communications media. In the digital revolution of the postmodern age in which we live, Christian mission must take into account the structures in which people send and receive messages. These structures determine the extent to which the gospel is heard, received, understood, and believed in any cultural context. Translating and contextualizing the message into the vernacular of Christianity, therefore, must include investments in media technology for everyone, but especially for oral learners. And seventhly, the Power of Faith ministry illustrates some of the connecting points between the emerging church movement, which eschews traditional religion and stresses independence and flexibility in religious innovation on the one hand, and the older traditional church, which stresses tradition and over change on the other. The Power of Faith Ministries, in its modus operandi, is an example of how the tension between change and tradition can be bridged. And number 8, emerging churches like the Power of Faith Ministries as a growing religious phenomenon in Jamaica, along with an array of other emerging independent new Pentecostal churches, perhaps is a challenge to the new thinking which proposes a secular state for Caribbean society. Well, given its long religious tradition, one of the controversies in the public square in Jamaica today is a very public debate concerning the true nature and character of the Jamaican state. Is the Jamaican state essentially religious in nature and predominantly Christian in values, as newspaper columnist and Catholic deacon Peter Aspute strenuously contends? Or is it non-religious in nature and secular in essence, as columnist Martin Henry contends? The importance of this debate surrounds some significant constitutional challenges being tested in the courts in Jamaica as they relate to rights and privileges guaranteed by the state. Let me conclude. We pointed out that the Caribbean is a relatively small, diverse, and complex community. As a sub-region of the Americas, its exotic appeal belies some significant socio-political challenges that threaten to undermine and erode the very fragile fabric of Caribbean societies. Underlying everything is the presence of religion which pervades all of Caribbean life and thought. Christianity in the Caribbean in particular, originally the religion of the master class, is at a significant transitional moment. Despite its long historical presence in the region, the socio-political foundations it has deposited in Caribbean societies, it is being challenged by new and sometimes militant thinking regarding its relevance, effectiveness, and hegemonic status previously enjoyed. The case of the Power of Faith Ministries, which originated in Jamaica and has now become a transnational experience, warrants a more careful study of the missiological dimensions of indigenous contextual Christian expressions that occur in such new Pentecostal movements. Like other new Pentecostal movements in neighboring Latin America, the Power of Faith Ministries is transforming the religion of the master class into the religion of the people by taking the uplifting tenets of the Christian gospel to the poor and the marginalized. The new forms of Christianity it posits introduce new elements of Christian witness as a mass movement within the emerging church movement, effectively blending change with tradition through the paradigm of mission as transformation. As senior pastor and co-founder, Delford Davis expresses the Power of Faith ministry philosophy of mission this way: when people's lives are changed, communities are changed, the country will be changed because you produce better citizens. And out of those persons whose lives have been transformed, many programs are now on stream. The case of the Power of Faith Ministries underscores the importance of holistic mission as demonstrated by Jesus in Matthew 9. Well, I hope you found in the presentation that I gave something to reflect on in regards to the Caribbean context. And we are at this point in our journey beginning to take seriously the issue of contextualizing the faith within the realities of Caribbean society. We look forward to the discussion as it continues.